A figure moves through the moonlit yard, a dark silhouette against the shimmering pool. A man watches from his window, his face a mask of cold fury. A skunk, startlingly small and black and white, scurries into the frame. The woman's shriek echoes, cut short by a foul, misty cloud. He smiles, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes. He has won, but the victory tastes like a warning. The first time she did it, Elias thought it was a mistake. A lost neighbor, a drunken teenager, someone who'd stumbled into the wrong yard. He'd seen her from his bedroom window. A wisp of a girl in a white bathing suit, sliding into the obsidian water of his pool around midnight. The security light on the patio hadn't even flickered. He stood there, a specter in the darkness of his own home, watching as she swam lazy laps, her movements as fluid and silent as a ghost's. He could have called the police. He could have shouted from the window. Instead, he just watched. A strange, primal curiosity held him in place. It was audacious, this trespass. It was a violation, yes, but one so casual and confident that it bordered on art. He waited until she had climbed out, leaving a trail of dripping footprints on the stone, before he finally turned away. The second time, there was no doubt. The following week, on a Tuesday, the familiar figure appeared again. This time, she brought a small, cheap, inflatable raft. She lay on it, a single earbud in her ear, and drifted under the stars. The audacity was what got to him. She wasn't hiding. She was acting like she had every right to be there. This wasn't a mistake. This was a statement. He had to do something. The next morning, he called his lawyer. "Trespassing," Elias said into the phone, his voice tight. "I want to press charges. Mr. Thorne, is there any damage?" "Any theft?" His lawyer, a laconic man named Arthur, asked. "No, just, she's using my pool. Without permission. Do you know who she is?" Elias hesitated. "I think she lives a few houses down. Brownstone with a big oak tree out front." "Have you tried talking to her, Elias? This seems like a civil matter first." "Talking to her?" "Arthur, she's breaking into my property. She's taking a swim. Let's not make it a federal crime just yet. Put up a taller fence, get a gate alarm, maybe. A lawsuit is going to cost you a fortune and make you look, well, a little unhinged." He hung up, the lawyer's words a dull thrum of frustration in his ears. Unhinged. He was the one being violated, and he was the one being called unhinged. Elias was a man of order. His life was a series of meticulously planned victories. His career as a financial analyst, his immaculate home, his carefully curated art collection, all were monuments to control. This girl was a chaotic, unwelcome element in his perfect world. She was a single, jarring note in a symphony of precision. He tried the fence. He hired a contractor to install an 8-foot wrought iron barrier. It was expensive and took 3 days, the clang of metal on metal a constant, grating reminder of his loss of control. He told himself this would solve it. This would restore the quiet, ordered sanctity of his home. The next night, he was woken by a faint splash. He went to the window, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. She was there. She had climbed over the new fence, leaving a faint scuff mark on one of the bars. The sight of her, a defiant smirk on her face as she looked up at his window, sent a jolt of pure, white-hot rage through him. She knew he was watching. This wasn't just a trespass anymore. It was a taunt. The rage was a new feeling, a powerful, ugly thing that clawed at him from the inside. Elias had always been a man of quiet anger, a man who believed in strategic retaliation. He wouldn't call the cops. He wouldn't talk to her. Those were the actions of a man who was already losing. He would win this with a different kind of precision. He spent the next day on his laptop, his searches growing more and more unhinged, as Arthur had so kindly put it. Legal deterrence, non-lethal booby traps, wildlife control services. The last search yielded an interesting result. A local company specializing in nuisance animal relocation. He called them, his voice low and conspiratorial. "I have a problem with a stray animal," he said. "What kind of animal, sir?" the man on the other end asked, his voice slow and patient. A skunk." The word felt odd on his tongue. "We can set a live trap, but they're protected. We can't just get rid of it." No, I want it to be relocated to a different part of my property, near the pool." Just for a short time. A pause. Sir, I think you're going to have to be more specific. We can't use an animal as a deterrent. No, of course not, Elias said, feigning an innocent tone. I've just been having a problem with pests, and I heard that the scent of a skunk can be a natural deterrent. I'm looking for a humane, natural solution. The man on the phone seemed to relax, falling into the rote language of his job. Well, we can certainly set a trap and upon finding a skunk, move it to a different location on your property. There are no guarantees it'll stay, of course. That's all I ask, Elias said. A cold, hard plan was solidifying in his mind. He wasn't going to harm her. He wasn't a monster. He was simply going to use nature's most potent weapon to restore order. It was brilliant. It was passive. It was the perfect solution. The trapper arrived the next day, a burly man with a weathered face who looked like he had seen everything. He set a humane cage trap near the back fence, baiting it with peanut butter. This is for a raccoon, sir, he said, eyeing Elias. A skunk is a lot harder to catch. They're skittish. Elias just nodded, the thought of the skunk in the cage, a potential weapon, a small, furry ally, filling him with a sense of grim satisfaction. He was preparing for war, a silent suburban war of attrition. He would make his territory so inhospitable she would never trespass again. That night she didn't come, nor the night after. The pool remained untouched, the water a placid, shimmering sheet. The silence was a relief, but also a new kind of torment. He found himself checking the window compulsively, a tense knot in his stomach. The absence of her trespass was more unnerving than her presence. It was a lull before a storm he knew was coming. Then, on a Friday night, he heard it. The splash, she was back. She had brought a friend this time, a boy with messy hair and a loud laugh. They were cannonballing into his pool, the sound echoing across the silent neighborhood. This was it. This was the final escalation. They weren't just using his pool. They were desecrating it. He went to the window, his hand trembling as he reached for the phone. This time he wouldn't call a lawyer. This time he would call the police. But before he could dial, he saw it. A flash of black and white near the fence. The skunk! It had been trapped, and the trapper had relocated it just as Elias had requested, placing the cage near the pool equipment. Elias had paid extra to make sure of it. The boy saw it first. He was climbing out of the pool, laughing when he froze, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Dude, is that a... The girl turned, her laughter dying in her throat. She saw it too. The small striped creature, its tail raised, a warning. She looked from the skunk to the boy, then up at Elias's window. Her face was a storm of emotions, shock, fear, and then slowly a look of dawning comprehension. She knew. She knew this was his doing. The skunk let out a guttural hiss. The boy scrambled back, nearly falling into the pool. "Get out of here!" he yelled. The skunk's tail went up another inch, a final definitive warning. The girl's eyes, locked on Elias's, were suddenly filled with a deep, chilling rage. This wasn't a playful trespass anymore. This was a battle, and he had just launched the first weapon. The skunk didn't spray. It didn't have to. The fear was a tangible thing in the air, thick and acrid. She turned, grabbed her towel, and started running. The boy followed, a clumsy, panicked retreat. Elias watched them go, the sight of their terrified backs a balm to his bruised sense of control. He had won. He had won without a single word, without a single confrontation. He had used a wild animal, a mere pest, to reclaim his territory. The silence that fell over his yard after they were gone was the most profound peace he had ever known. He felt the cold fury inside him begin to recede, replaced by a deep, satisfying calm. He looked at the small skunk, still standing near the pool equipment, its tail slowly lowering. It was his sentinel, his unlikely ally. Elias felt a strange sense of camaraderie with the creature. He had simply acted on instinct, on the primal need to protect his home. He had shown her the consequences of crossing him. She would never return. But as he looked at the skunk, a thought, cold and unsettling, crept into his mind. He had used a living creature as a weapon. He had deliberately introduced a wild animal into a domestic space to scare a girl. The victory felt less clean now, less brilliant. He had gone too far, maybe. The cold satisfaction curdled into a bitter aftertaste. The skunk was still there, a tiny black and white reminder of his overreach. And then, as the last of the streetlights went out, he saw the glint of something silver on the ground near the pool ladder. A necklace. She had dropped it in her panic. And suddenly he knew. She would be back for it. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The skunk wasn't a solution. It was a complication. He stood at the window for what felt like an eternity, the sight of the necklace on the damp stone a stark, undeniable truth. It was a simple silver chain, a small, intricate heart pendant catching the faint moonlight. It wasn't just a lost item. It was a tether. A reason for her to return. His meticulously crafted victory, the perfect passive-aggressive strike, was now a flimsy house of cards. The skunk was no longer his ally. It was a ticking time bomb he had introduced into his own yard. The calm he had felt minutes ago had evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that slithered through his veins. This wasn't over. This was a hostage situation, with a tiny silver heart as the bargaining chip. He didn't sleep that night. He watched the yard, a sentinel in his own prison. The skunk ambled about, a dark shadow against the pale stone, oblivious to the high-stakes human drama it had been thrust into. Elias had 100 scenarios running through his head. She would come back with her friend emboldened by anger. She would bring her parents. She would call the police herself, claim he had set a dangerous trap. The irony of it was a bitter pill. He, the man of order, had just created a situation more chaotic and unpredictable than any of her trespasses had been. The sun rose, painting the world in a wash of muted pastels. The silver heart on the ground looked less ominous in the daylight, just a forgotten piece of jewelry. Elias felt a profound shame. He, a successful man in his mid-40s, had resorted to using a wild animal to scare a girl. He had acted on a visceral impulse, and now he was faced with the messy, unpredictable consequences. He had to clean up his own mess. He went outside, the morning air cool and crisp. The skunk was nowhere to be seen. Good. He approached the necklace, his hand hovering over it. It felt wrong to touch it, like it was still hers, still imbued with her rebellious spirit. He picked it up, the chain cool against his fingertips, the heart surprisingly heavy. He would put it in a small box, something official. He would go to her house, knock on the door, and hand it to her. He would apologize, explain his actions as a desperate attempt to protect his property. He would be the bigger person. He would restore the order he had so foolishly dismantled. He walked to the brownstone 3 doors down, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm. He rehearsed his speech in his head. I am so sorry for my behavior. My actions were completely out of line. I was just frustrated. He held the box, a small peace offering, in his hand. He had a brief childish fantasy of her being so moved by his humility that she would offer to mow his lawn. He knocked. A woman in her late 40s, her face etched with a familiar weariness, answered the door. Can I help you? She asked, her voice flat. Yes, I'm Elias Thorne. I live 3 houses down. I think your daughter might have dropped this in my backyard last night. He held out the box. The woman didn't take it. She just stared at him, her eyes narrowing. My daughter doesn't have a necklace like that, she said, her voice turning cold. And she was home all last night. Elias felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed. Who are you again? She asked, her tone now laced with suspicion. You said you were my neighbor? Yes, Elias Thorne. He offered a strained smile. I just found it. I was just trying to do the right thing. She took the box, her fingers brushing his. The touch was like a static shock. I'll ask her, she said, her voice clipped. If it's hers, I'll let you know. She shut the door, not with a slam, but with a quiet, definitive click that felt louder than a shout. He walked back to his house, the false sense of victory and peace completely gone. The confrontation had been a disaster. She hadn't been there. She had lied to her mother, or her mother had lied for her. And now, not only did he look like an unhinged neighbor, but he was also a man who had lied about a girl's necklace. The carefully constructed plan had unraveled in a matter of seconds. He sat in his living room, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. The police. He had to call the police. He couldn't handle this himself. He would tell them everything. The trespass, his frustration, the skunk. He would be an open book. He would present a case, a rational man who had been pushed to the edge. He dialed the non-emergency line, his hands shaking. "My name is Elias Thorne. I'm reporting a trespassing incident. It's been a recurring problem." He gave the address, and the officer's voice on the other end was a calming, professional drone. "And what's the nature of the trespass, sir?" Elias took a deep breath. "A young girl has been swimming in my pool at night. I've asked her to stop, but she won't." The lie slipped out effortlessly. He hadn't asked her to stop. He had used a skunk, but he couldn't tell them that. Not yet. Not until he had to. "Have you considered getting a restraining order?" the officer asked. "Or a no trespassing sign?" "I have a new fence. An alarm, nothing works. And last night, I had a pest control company release a skunk near the pool to deter her. I don't know what to do." A long silence on the other end. "Sir, did you say you intentionally released a skunk on your property to deter someone?" The voice was no longer professional. It was laced with a disbelief that verged on pity. It was a humane relocation, Elias insisted, the words tumbling out in a desperate jumble. "A natural deterrent. The pest control company said it was..." "Sir, releasing a wild animal with the intent to harm or intimidate a person is a crime. That's a serious charge. You need to stop what you're doing immediately. If she or her parents report this, you're looking at a felony." The line went dead. Elias sat there, the phone heavy in his hand, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. The perfectly crafted victory, the quiet, efficient solution, had just exploded in his face. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had committed a crime, a felony. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a perpetrator. He had escalated the war, and in doing so, he had become the villain. The thought was a sickening punch to the gut. The world was no longer black and white. It was a murky, dangerous gray, and he was sinking in it. He looked out the window again. The pool was a beautiful, tranquil blue, and then he saw it. A flash of movement in the bushes near his fence. A pair of eyes, small and dark, watching him. Not the girls, not the skunks, the eyes of a raccoon. It was a different kind of trespasser, a new unforeseen variable. It was nature's judgment. He had opened the door, and now it seemed all the wild things were coming in. His world was collapsing inward. He had called the police not to report a crime, but to confess to one. The word felony still rang in his ears, a chilling, definitive pronouncement. He wasn't a homeowner protecting his property anymore. He was a desperate man caught in his own trap. And now the raccoon. It was a small detail, but it felt monstrous, a symbol of the chaos he had invited into his life. He watched it disappear back into the overgrowth, another ghost in the machine he had so foolishly built. He couldn't go to her house again. He had made a fool of himself. He couldn't call the police. He had already incriminated himself. He was isolated, trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. The only solution now was to wait. Wait for her to come for the necklace. He would be ready this time. No more traps, no more wild animals. Just a simple, direct confrontation. He would return the necklace, apologize, and hope that she was a reasonable person who would drop the whole thing. The thought was a thin, fragile reed of hope, but it was all he had. The hours crawled by. The sun arced across the sky, and the long shadows of twilight began to stretch across his lawn. Every passing car made him jump. Every rustle of leaves was a potential intruder. His home, once his sanctuary, was now a fortress under siege. He was in the kitchen making a cup of tea to steady his nerves when he heard it. A quiet click. The sound of his back gate opening. His heart seized in his chest. He looked out the window. It was her. She moved with the same quiet confidence he had first seen, a wraith in the dim light. She was alone this time. She walked past the pool, her eyes scanning the ground. She was looking for it. The necklace. Elias stood in the shadows, watching, the box with her pendant in his hand. He took a deep breath, the air thick with tension. It was time. He stepped outside, the screen door hissing shut behind him. "Looking for something?" he asked, his voice low and even, a carefully practiced calm. She whirled around, her eyes wide with fear, then narrowing to a stare of pure defiance. The same look she had given him the night before. "You have no right to be here," he said, the words feeling empty. "It's my necklace," she said, her voice shaking slightly but holding firm. "And you know it." He held up the small box. "This?" Her eyes darted to the box, then back to his face. "Give it to me." "I will," he said. "But we need to talk." "I'm not talking to you," she said, taking a step back. "I want my necklace." "Give it to me, or I'm calling the police." The irony was not lost on him. "I already talked to them," he said, a weary resignation in his voice. "And they told me that what I did was a crime. So we're both in a situation here. You for trespassing, me for using a skunk." The word felt ridiculous now, a punchline to a very unfunny joke. She just stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She hadn't expected this. She had expected anger, accusations, not a confession. You told them?" "I did." He took a step closer, holding the box out to her. "Look, I'm sorry. I was out of line. I was just frustrated. I put up a fence and you still came back. It felt like you were taunting me." A flicker of something, not anger, but a profound sadness crossed her face. "I wasn't taunting you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The fence." It was a challenge. A game. A game. The word hit him like a physical blow. To her, this was all a game. He had been fighting a war for the sanctity of his property, and she had just been playing a game. She took another step closer, her eyes on the box. "My dad gave me that necklace," she said. He's in the military. He's been gone a long time. The air went out of him. The anger, the frustration, the shame, it all seemed to dissipate, replaced by a deep, hollow empathy. This wasn't a game to her. This was something else. A desperate attempt to find a moment of peace, a moment of control in a life she couldn't control. The pool, his pristine, ordered pool, was her only solace. He hadn't been fighting a rebellious teenager. He had been fighting a scared little girl. He held the box out to her. "I'm sorry," he said again, the words full of a sincerity he hadn't known he was capable of. She reached for it, her fingers brushing his. The touch was different this time. Not a static shock, but a shared humanity. "I'm sorry too," she said. "I shouldn't have been in your pool. I know." He let go of the box. She held it in her palm, a small silver symbol of their shared failure. For a moment, they just stood there, two strangers in the dark, a silent truce declared. Then he heard it, a rustle in the bushes, a low growl. "The raccoon!" It emerged from the shadows, its eyes gleaming in the faint light. It was looking at them, its tiny face a mask of primal hunger. It took a step forward, then another. It was coming for them. He had created a mess, a real, tangible one, and now it was coming to collect. The moment of peace was over. The game had just become very real. The moment of shared understanding shattered. The raccoon, no longer a symbolic pest, was a living, breathing threat. Its low growl vibrated in the air, a sound of wild hunger that seemed too large for its small body. Elias and the girl stood frozen, their truce forgotten, their focus now solely on the creature advancing from the bushes. The silver necklace dangled from her hand, a useless bauble in the face of this new primal reality. He had no weapon, no stick, no rock, just the box he had carried the necklace in, and a profound, bone-deep sense of regret. The raccoon took another step, its eyes fixed on them, its body tense. "Don't move," Elias whispered, his voice barely audible. The girl didn't listen. She took a step back, a small gasp of terror escaping her lips. The sound was all it took. The raccoon lunged. It wasn't a full-blown attack, not yet. It was a bluff, a sudden, menacing rush that ended with the animal a few feet from them, its teeth bared in a snarl. But it was enough. The girl screamed, a high, piercing sound that cut through the night. She stumbled backward, tripping over her own feet, and fell with a splash into the shallow end of the pool. Elias reacted without thinking. The creature's focus shifted to the thrashing in the water. He saw his chance. With a shout, he charged at the raccoon, not to fight it, but to scare it. He swung the empty box wildly, a man desperate to protect something he had so recently sought to drive away. The raccoon, startled by the sudden aggression, scrambled back, hissing, "Get out of here!" Elias yelled, his voice hoarse with adrenaline. He took another step toward it, and the raccoon, sensing it had lost the upper hand, turned and vanished back into the bushes, its growl fading into the rustle of leaves. He stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, the absurd box still in his hand. He had just protected the very person he had set out to punish. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. He turned and looked at the girl. She was on her back in the water, her face a pale oval in the darkness, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The necklace was gone, lost to the inky depths of the pool. He knelt at the edge. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice now soft, concerned. She sat up, pushing wet hair out of her eyes. She was shivering, not from the cold of the water, but from shock. "My necklace," she whispered, her voice a broken thing. "We'll find it," he said, and the words surprised even him. This was no longer about his property or his sense of order. This was about a girl who had lost something precious. He reached down and offered her his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, then slowly, hesitantly, she took it. Her hand was cold, small in his. He pulled her from the water, her shoes squishing with every step. "I'm sorry," he said again. The words an inadequate apology for everything, the skunk. The fear, the anger, and now the lost necklace. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice still shaky. "The raccoon. You were protecting me." He didn't have a good answer. "I don't know," he said, a simple, truthful admission. I saw you were scared, and I felt responsible." They stood there, two strangers in the dark, soaking wet and utterly lost. The sound of a car's engine rumbled down the street, and both of them stiffened. It was a police cruiser, its headlights cutting through the night. The car slowed, then pulled into his driveway, its lights sweeping across the front of his house, illuminating them both in a harsh, unforgiving glare. The woman from the brownstone, the girl's mother, got out of the passenger side, her face a mask of panic and fury. "Cassie!" she shrieked, her eyes wild. "What are you doing? Why are you soaking wet?" Her eyes darted from her daughter to Elias, and the fury on her face hardened into pure accusation. "You!" she spat at him. "You let a wild animal loose on my daughter." An officer, a broad-shouldered man with a serious face, got out of the driver's side. "Mr. Thorne?" he asked, his voice low and authoritative. "We got a call about a man harassing a minor. We need to talk." Elias looked from the furious mother to the officer, then back at the girl, Cassie, who was now huddled behind her mother, a silent, shivering witness. His heart, which had just begun to slow its frantic rhythm, started to race again. He had tried to fix his mistake. He had tried to be the hero. But it seemed his past actions had already set in motion a future he could not escape. The game was over. The consequences were here. And they were just beginning to unfold. The scene was a tableau of suburban dread. The police lights painted the three figures in stark, unnatural colors. The mother, a statue of righteous fury. The officer, a looming figure of authority. And Elias, a man caught in a moment of utter defeat. The girl, Cassie, was a silent specter behind her mother, her wet clothes clinging to her, her face a mask of shock. "Sir, a few moments ago, we received a call from a Mr. Arthur Finch," the officer said, his voice flat and professional. "He stated that you called him this morning, claiming to have let a wild animal loose on your property to deter a person from trespassing. He was concerned for public safety." Elias's mind went blank. Arthur. He had called his lawyer, not to confess, but to seek advice. Arthur must have put the pieces together. The confession, the panic in his voice, the trespass. Arthur had done what any sane person would have done. He had acted to prevent a catastrophe. He had just ensured Elias's doom. I was just... Elias began, the words catching in his throat. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to stay right here," the officer said, his hand moving to the holster on his belt. The action was small, but the implication was a thunderclap. Elias was no longer a disgruntled neighbor. He was a suspect. The mother, seeing her moment, pushed past the officer. "You're a sick man?" she shrieked, her voice shaking with rage. "You terrorize my daughter. You should be ashamed of yourself." The officer stepped between them. "Ma'am, please step back. Let me handle this. He's a menace," she screamed. "He told me my daughter wasn't even here. He was trying to cover it up." Cassie, from behind her mother, finally spoke. "Mom, stop! He wasn't." Her voice was a small, fragile thing. Her mother didn't hear her. Her gaze was locked on Elias, a pure, unadulterated hatred that was a mirror of his own from the night before. The officer turned his attention back to Elias. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your identification, and I need you to explain what happened here tonight." Elias felt the walls of his perfect world crumbling. His career, his reputation, his life of ordered precision, all of it was being washed away by a single impulsive act. He had sought to control a situation, and in doing so he had lost control of everything. "I'll tell you what happened," he said, his voice quiet, resigned. "I was an idiot. I let my anger get the best of me. I used a skunk to scare her. I'm sorry." The words were an admission of guilt, a plea for absolution he knew he wouldn't get. The officer's expression didn't change. "A skunk, sir?" Elias nodded, his gaze dropping to the ground. "Yes, I just wanted her to stop coming." I didn't think it would lead to this." The officer sighed, a sound of weary professional disappointment. "And what's this about a raccoon?" Elias looked up, his eyes meeting Cassie's for a brief, tense moment. Her expression was unreadable. She knew what had happened. She knew he had protected her. She was his only witness, his only hope for a shred of credibility. He opened his mouth to explain, to tell the story of the raccoon, of the fear, of his bizarre act of protection. But he was interrupted by a new voice. "I'll tell you what happened." It was Cassie. She stepped out from behind her mother, her small, soaked frame a testament to the night's chaos. Her mother tried to pull her back, but Cassie stood her ground, her gaze fixed on the officer. "The raccoon. It was coming at us, and he scared it away. He was trying to protect me." Her mother stared at her, her jaw slack. "Cassie, what are you talking about? He set a skunk on you!" "He did," Cassie said, her voice stronger now, a strange mixture of accusation and defense. "And it was wrong. But the raccoon came, and he saved me. He was trying to help." The officer looked from the girl to her mother, then back to Elias. He was a professional, trained to read people, to see through lies. He looked at the girl's shivering form, at the unreadable expression on Elias's face, at the furious confusion on the mother's. "Ma'am," he said to Cassie's mother, "is there any way you can verify this?" I don't know," she stammered, her outrage giving way to confusion. Why would she say that? "Because it's the truth," Cassie said, her voice now a low, resolute whisper. "He gave me my necklace back, too. The one I lost." The mother's eyes darted to the empty spot on the ground where the necklace should have been. "What necklace?" "My father's," Cassie said. "The one he gave me before he left." The officer looked at the mother. "Is this true, ma'am? About a necklace?" She looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with a new kind of terror, the terror of a parent who has just discovered a deep, hidden truth about her child. I found a box. I didn't know what it was." The officer turned back to Elias. "Sir, this is a very messy situation, but I'm going to have to advise you to hire a lawyer. What you did with the skunk is a serious offense. However, the girl's testimony, that's going to change things. We'll have to file a report. But for tonight, I'm going to need you to stay away from this family, and I'm going to need you to find that skunk's owner. We'll be in touch." He turned, a final, definitive presence, and walked back to his car. The mother, still reeling, took her daughter's arm and led her away, their figures disappearing into the darkness. Elias was left alone in the harsh glare of the police lights, a man who had won and lost everything in the same breath. He had confessed to a crime, but in doing so, he had earned a strange, fragile absolution. The quiet of the yard returned, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was the silence of a man who had faced his own darkness and, in a moment of shared humanity, had found a flicker of light. The perfect life was gone. But maybe, just maybe, a real life was about to begin.